The house seemed to hold its breath as I stood in the center of the living room, the creaking floorboards beneath my feet groaning in protest. My heart raced, pounding in my ears, drowning out the oppressive silence. I clutched Sam's small hand tightly in mine, his trembling fingers a stark reminder of the peril we faced. The air was thick with a musty, rotten smell, the scent of decay and something far worse, something ancient and malevolent. A low, guttural growl emanated from beneath the floorboards, sending shivers down my spine. The lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. I could hear it moving below us, the scratching and shuffling growing louder, more insistent. My grip on Sam tightened as the floorboards began to warp and bend, as if the house itself was alive and breathing. "Mom, I'm scared," Sam whispered, his voice barely audible over the escalating noise. "I know, sweetheart," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the terror clawing at my throat. "We're going to get out of here, I promise." The floor beneath us buckled violently, and I staggered, pulling Sam with me. A sickening crack split the air as the wood splintered, and a black, oily substance seeped through the gaps, spreading like a malignant stain. The growling intensified, now a cacophony of rage and hunger, a monstrous symphony that shook the very foundations of our home. I had to act quickly. There was no time to think, only to react. I lifted Sam into my arms, his small body light but trembling. The front door seemed a million miles away, but it was our only hope. I took a deep breath and ran, praying that we would make it before the darkness consumed us. We moved into the house on a bright, crisp autumn day. The sun was shining, casting a warm glow over the charming old Victorian that I had fallen in love with the moment I saw it. It was everything I had ever wanted, a fresh start for me and my son, Sam, after the tumultuous years that had followed my divorce. The house was perfect, or so it seemed. "Mom, look. There's a tree house." Sam's voice was filled with excitement as he pointed to the large oak tree in the backyard. The treehouse, though weathered and worn, still stood strong among the branches. "Go on, explore," I encouraged, smiling as he ran off, his worries seemingly left behind in our old life. I watched him climb the tree, his laughter echoing through the yard, and felt a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. As I unpacked, I marveled at the details of the house, the intricate woodwork, the stained glass windows, the ornate fireplace in the living room. It felt like a home where we could finally settle down and be happy. But as the days passed, I started to notice things. Little things, at first. It began with the floorboards. They creaked more than they should have, even for a house of this age. At night, I would hear them groaning and popping as if someone, or something, was moving about when we were supposed to be alone. Sam didn't seem to notice, his sleep undisturbed by the noises that kept me awake. Then came the dreams. Vivid, unsettling dreams of being trapped beneath the floor, unable to move or breathe, while something unseen and malevolent watched me with cold, unblinking eyes. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, the feeling of being watched lingering long after the dream had faded. One evening, as I was tucking Sam into bed, he looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and said, "Mom, there's someone under the floor." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "In the basement," he replied. I heard them. They were talking to me. I forced a smile, trying to hide my unease. "It's just your imagination, Sam. There's no one down there." But his words gnawed at me. That night, after Sam was asleep, I went down to the basement. The air was damp and cold, the single light bulb casting eerie shadows on the walls. I listened, holding my breath, but there was nothing. Just the creak of the old house settling and the distant hum of the furnace. I tried to put it out of my mind, but the feeling of unease only grew stronger. I started to notice other things, the way the temperature would drop suddenly in certain rooms, the strange, almost imperceptible whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. The sense of being watched became almost unbearable. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate footsteps, pacing back and forth. I knew Sam was asleep in his room. My heart pounded as I grabbed a flashlight and crept upstairs. The hallway was empty, but the sound continued, now coming from Sam's room. I pushed open the door and shone the flashlight inside. Sam was still asleep, but the footsteps were louder now, circling his bed. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck and spun around, but there was nothing there. The next morning, I decided to investigate further. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with the house. I started with the basement, searching every corner for anything that might explain the noises and the strange occurrences. It was in a far corner, behind a stack of old boxes, that I found it. A small, square door set into the floor, barely visible in the dim light. My hands shook as I pried it open. The stench that emanated from below was overwhelming. Rotting wood and something far worse, something I couldn't identify. I shone the flashlight into the opening and saw a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I had to know what was down there. I climbed down, each step creaking ominously under my weight. The basement below the basement was even colder, the air thick and suffocating. The walls were lined with old wooden beams, blackened and decayed. As I moved the flashlight around, it caught on something shiny, metal bars, forming a small, crude cage in the corner. My heart pounded as I approached it, the smell growing stronger. Inside the cage was a pile of rags and bones, old and brittle, covered in a thick layer of dust. My stomach churned at the sight, and I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, casting wild shadows. And then I heard it. A low, guttural growl, coming from the darkness beyond the cage. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The growling grew louder, accompanied by the sound of scratching and shuffling. I grabbed the flashlight and ran up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind me. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, my mind racing with fear and confusion. I wanted to leave, to take Sam and run as far away as possible, but I knew that whatever was beneath the floorboards wouldn't let us go so easily. That night, as I lay in bed, the growling returned, louder and more insistent. The floorboards trembled, and I could hear it moving, closer and closer. I clutched Sam tightly, his small body trembling against mine. "We have to leave," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the noise. "We have to leave now." We made our way to the living room, the floorboards groaning beneath our feet. The growling followed us, the air thick with menace. I could feel it, just below the surface, waiting to strike. As we reached the front door, the floor erupted, wood splintering and breaking apart. A black, oily substance oozed up from the cracks, spreading across the floor. The growling was deafening now, a monstrous symphony of rage and hunger. I lifted Sam into my arms and ran, the front door our only hope. The floor buckled and warped beneath us, the black ooze seeping up through the cracks. I could feel it pulling at my feet, trying to drag us down into the darkness. We burst through the front door and into the night, the cold air hitting us like a slap. I ran down the driveway, not daring to look back. The house behind us groaned and shuddered, the growling fading into the distance. We didn't stop running until we reached the safety of a neighbor's house. They took us in, their eyes wide with concern and confusion as I babbled incoherently about what had happened. The police were called, and they searched the house from top to bottom, but found nothing. The basement door had been sealed, the cage and the bones gone, as if they had never existed. We never went back. The house was sold, and I never found out what had caused the horrors beneath the floorboards. But sometimes, late at night, I can still hear the growling, a faint echo of the nightmare that almost consumed us. And I know that whatever it was, it's still out there, waiting for its next victim.